And we are going to ask one of those ministers of word and service, Mindy Tilburg, who is on Senate Council, to offer us a reading as we move into the offering part of our agenda, and a prayer as we start discussing finances and budget. Mindy, can you unmute and join us?
Thank you, Bishop. A reading from Mark chapter 12. Jesus sat down opposite the treasury and watched the crowd putting money into the treasury. Many rich people put in large sums. A poor widow came and put in 2 small copper coins, which are worth a penny. Then he called his disciples and said to them, "Truly, I tell you, this widow has put in more than all those who are contributing to the treasury. For all of them have contributed out of their abundance. But she, out of her poverty, has put in everything she had, all she had to live on." Let us pray. Generous and loving God, we come to you in thanksgiving, knowing that all we are and that all we have is a gift from you. In faith and love, help us to do your will. Speak your words into the depth of our souls that we may hear you clearly. We are listening. In your holy name we pray. Amen.
And thank you. I am mindful of the time, so we're going to have our treasurer, Scott Schulte, give our financial report. Then we'll break for lunch, and then we'll come back to talk about the proposed budget. So the show is yours.
Okay. Thank you, Bishop, and good morning, everyone. I'm delighted to be here to present my treasurer's report for this year. Typically, this report consists of 3 different parts, and no exception this year. I'll take a walk through how we finished the last fiscal year, the 2022 year. I've got some comments on this current year, and then I'll talk about what the proposed budget is for the next year, the 2024 year. So, without any further ado, let's get this going. Here we go. Okay. So for 2022, our total revenue and support, $1,613,315. This was less than what we had expected in our revised budget for the year, and also less than the previous year by about $21,000. I do want to point out that for total revenue and support, we did release some temporarily restricted funds, a little bit over $40,000, to help balance the budget at the end of the year. Our total expenditures were then the same as our total revenue and support, $1,613,000, which was less than what was budgeted and less than the previous year. So we had some reduction of expenses to help try to compensate for a shortage of income for the year. Our year in surplus was 0 because we had released the exact amount of funds from temporarily restricted that we needed, which would have been about a deficit of about $40,000 if we had not released those funds. Just for comparison's sake, we ended 2021 with a surplus of $4,669. In 2022, we received $1,454,000 in congregational support. This was almost $100,000 less than the previous year, which is a decrease of 6.9%. If you want to look at what our detailed giving numbers or our revenue numbers were, and also our expenses, there is a part in the budget that's presented that shows you exactly what those numbers are for each category of our spending. So I welcome you to take a look at those if you are interested. So what does that look like then? We've got a chart here that shows over the past 20 years what our congregational giving is for each of those years. And as you can see, there's been a general downward trend in those giving numbers. particularly steep between 2009 and 2011, as you can see, and then that trend has continued in recent years. That line has gotten a little bit steeper as well last year and the year before. And then, as the bishop had pointed out in her remarks, in 2020 we saw an increase in giving, which was a surprise given that that was the first year of the pandemic. So overall, since 2008, we've seen a reduction in our giving of approximately $800,000 from where we were that year. Now, having said that, I do want to say a very very heartfelt thank you to all of our congregations and our individual donors for their continued support in 2022, and further thanks to our congregations and donors for their response to the annual appeal that we have done. That the response has been tremendous over the past couple of years and has been very helpful in helping to make ends meet as we get towards the end of the year. So I don't usually talk about our current year and how we're doing within that, but I will get to that in a second. But I want to finish out my 2022 discussion. So as a result of our contributions being lower than what we had expected, our contribution to Churchwide was $727,074. This is a decrease of just about $50,000 from what we had contributed in 2021. We are continuing, we did continue, I should say, in 2022 at the contribution of 50%. So we're sharing half of the congregational support that we receive. We're sharing half of that with Churchwide. And one final point I want to make is that every year we are required to conduct an audit of our financial position, our books, and our processes. We had gotten behind with that a little bit because we had postponed that budget, not knowing how 2020 would go, so we had postponed that budget process as a cost-saving measure. However, this year we are working to catch up with that, and so they're actually we're scheduled to complete 3 audits this year, one for 20, and then 21 and 22, and so it'll be a busy year working with our auditors to complete that. And I do want to say that as soon as those audits are completed, we will post those on the Synod website. So those are available for you to review when they are complete. Really, the first one we are looking to complete, we are reviewing with our auditors here in a couple of weeks. So that'll be the first one. Should be available shortly. Okay, so now I want to get to what does 2023 look like? And this is a fiscal year that ends January 31st of 2024. The graph I'm showing you shows you the first 3 months of the year and what that giving looks like. And so the first 3 months you can see February and March were about $90,000 in giving, which is historically low for us. That's last year we had a giving amount of about $89,000 in 1 month, and that was the lowest that I had seen in my term as treasurer. And so this year we have our first 2 months of giving for the year are at that level. April was better. However, it's still well below where we need it to be. It shows the amount that we need to bring in each month to support our budget, and we're still well below that. So, as I've said to the Synod Council and to our Executive Committee, this is an alarming way for us to begin our fiscal year with giving at those amounts. So, our congregational support so far already for this year is $70,000 lower than what we had received last year at the same time at the end of the first quarter. That's a decrease of 23.3%. I'll say it again, a decrease of 23.3%. As a result, we've decreased our spending, primarily our contribution to Churchwide, because of that being a percentage of what we receive. So what's our next steps? How do we work to try to address that? Well, the first thing is we have already worked with the Budget Committee and then a recommendation to the Synod Council, which is looking at additional revisions to our budget for this year so that we can help to accommodate or to address the shortfall in giving. And so that's just this week. In fact, just yesterday, we had reviewed that with the Senate Council and approved those revisions. So in my written report, I had provided some comments on the revised budget for this year. There are more changes now as a result of this recent action by the Senate Assembly. There are more changes to that budget that we are using to help, as I said, accommodate the shortfall. And secondly, the action that we can take is as a community, we need to look and ensure that we are meeting our intentions of contributions, congregation contribution for the year. And I would encourage all of our congregations to reevaluate your giving for the synod. Review what you have. If you have our upcoming meetings around that, I would hope that we could discuss that to see if there are ways that your giving could increase or that it could return to previous levels of previous years. So now I'll move on to the next year. Here we go. There we go. Okay. So for 2024, the primary theme of this budget really is, as you saw from our 20-year trend, how do we continue to deal with anticipated reduction in mission support? So we're seeing that trend each year. And some years it's more, some it's less. I explained all these changes in my written report that's in the assembly binder. So those you can see all the details for what changes we have made to try to accommodate that. In my report this morning, I'm not going to talk so much about what changed, but talk about each of the area of ministries that we support, so that everybody has the same understanding of how our financial resources are used. And so this would follow more of a narrative budget kind of approach, which will help those that don't really like to follow the numbers too closely. I'm not going to try to glaze you over with a lot of numbers for the budget. I'm going to talk about the areas that we support, and then you'll see on the slide what those numbers are. So our mission relies heavily on congregations forwarding a portion of their regular offerings that we have discussed. When those offerings increase or decrease from year to year, the work of the church is strengthened or weakened, depending upon how this goes. And this not only impacts the synod, but it also impacts our impact. It also impacts our giving nationally and globally. So it's, again, we are church together, and so a reduction for our support translates into a reduction of the support that we can provide to our church-wide organization. Also, individuals, families, congregations may designate for the Synod Assembly offering and in response to the annual appeals. So we have an amount that's allocated for that. We will use some of the surplus that we had seen from 2022, as well as some of the proceeds that were left from a PPP loan that we received in 2020 to help support the work of the Synod if we don't receive the offerings or the support that we require. So we'll release about $40,000 again of those funds. And then in addition, the Synod receives grants or reimbursements from Churchwide. So some of that money that we provide to Churchwide comes back to us in the form of grants to help us out for congregational support, for mission support, for campus ministry. And so we will rely on those to the amount of about $50,000 to help fund our ministry. As I mentioned, we are church together, so half of our contribution we do share with the church-wide. This amount enables mission and ministry to happen beyond our borders, although, as I had mentioned, some of those funds do come back to us. So we will anticipate continuing to contribute to church-wide at 50% of the amount that we receive from our congregations. For the ministry entrusted to the Synod, this area of the budget supports the work of Camp Tomashinga and Hollis Renewal Center. These ministries provide outdoor ministry space so our kids and congregations have places to go to retreat and to get in touch with God's creation. We will support advocacy agencies in both Kansas and Missouri as a part of working ecumenically and to voice our concerns on matters of importance to all the corners of the Synod. And I suspect that most of you enjoy having a pastor or a PMA to work in your congregation. So we have funds that are allocated for the candidacy committee and the PMA team, and for those who shepherd those interests in ministry along the way. And then there are various ministries that help develop giving and the stewardship of resources through teams and committees such as Lutherans Restoring Creation, the stewardship team, and the companion synod team. So occasionally those teams have expenses, and so we have an amount set aside to help fund what expenses they may have in meeting or in travel and so forth. In the Ministry of Oversight and Pastoral Care, this part of the budget includes the salaries and compensation for our synod staff, the travel expenses that they incur as they make their way to all the corners of the synod. They're there to support, encourage congregations and leaders to assist during times of transition and conflict, and to provide guidance and resources for congregations as they are committed to being there in whatever these circumstances. This area of the budget also supports the campus pastors at our 3 campus ministry sites in both Kansas and Missouri to raise up leaders among young adults and to help them grow in their faith. We also provide help for congregations in transition through the call process ministers so that they can continue to share the good news with their community, and also there's funding for support of the Bishop's Theological Conference that the bishop discussed, so that rostered ministers and PMAs can continue to grow in their callings. In Ministry of ELCA Partnerships, this is the area of the budget where we will provide grants to various church-wide ministries. So Bethany College, Wartburg Seminary, and Lutheran School of Theology as they raise up and educate leaders. We also support a Lutheran Planned Giving Partnership to help us understand that our giving can help ensure a future for the things that we value. We also work with other synods in our region to partner in seeking new ways of being church together. For the Ministry of Place and Property, in 2019, we decided as a synod that we would share space with the Episcopal Church in downtown Kansas City. And they have been great partners with us in that the space that they rent to us comes fully loaded, I'll say, that we don't have to contribute for utilities and other items that typically would come along in addition to rent. So this has been a wonderful partnership with the Episcopal Church, and it fulfills the needs of the staff and provides for good meeting space when needed for various teams and committees. And then there are also the usual cost of running an office for any kind of organization, such as paper, a copier, phones, computers, etc., plus the annual audit expense that I had talked about earlier. All those things support the work not only of the staff, but the entire synod. And in Ministry of Leadership and Outreach, as we walk together, we need to support those that lead us by helping them communicate and providing them with the tools that they need. The same is true for enabling congregations to reach outward to those in need of hearing the good news. So we have funds set aside to support synod council meetings and conference and deans gatherings as well. In addition, there is a set aside for the bishop transition. Yes, there will be bishop transitions. Not sure when those will occur, but we need to prepare for those. And so we set aside funds so that we anticipate and are prepared for those transitions when they occur for the bishop and the synod staff. So in closing, I want to share the members of the mission budget team. It's essentially the officers of the synod plus our synod bookkeeper, Barbara Beadle, who has been with us since the synod was formed. For me, it's a joy and a privilege to be able to work with all of these fine stewards of the resources that we have as a synod. And so with that, I want to thank you for your time and attention. And Bishop, that concludes my report.
Okay, thank you very much. There will be an opportunity for you to ask ask questions, not only about the financial report, but also the budget.